Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Environment, Housing and Regeneration Select Committee, and my name is Councillor Wayne Bridges and I am chairman of this meeting. A key role of the committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activities, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. Details of the business to be considered today is shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room and also accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak, please note that you'll be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. For those in the public gallery this evening, you will not be on camera. A reminder to councillors, officers and those speaking today that you should turn your microphone button on when speaking. This will ensure you can be heard in the room and by those watching online. So going around the table this evening, to my right I'll introduce the people present. Substitute Councillor Teddy Barnes, Substitute Councillor Carol Melvin, Councillor Alan DeVille, Councillor Alan Chapman. To my left, Neil Fraser, Democratic Services Officer, the Opposition Lead Councillor Farley, Councillor Gardner, and the officers present here this evening, Rod Smith, Marion Finney, Ian Anderson, Mark Billings, Gary Pentecost, Dan Kennedy and Debbie Weller. Some quick housekeeping before I go on to the main agenda. We are not expecting a fire alarm this evening. However, if the fire alarm does go off, please follow the officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting point, which is the Civic Forecourt. Please switch your mobile devices off or place them on silent. And if we have residents here this evening, feedback forms are available in the room. With that said, we move to apologies for absence, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Apologies received from Councillors Kaufman and Brightman, with Councillors Melvin and Barnes present as their substitutes.
Thank you very much, and a warm welcome to our substitutes this evening. Declaration of interest in matters coming before this meeting, are there any? I can see no indications, in which case I can confirm that all business this evening will be discussed in part 1, which brings us on to item 4 to agree the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 6. Can we agree those? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got no issues with the minutes per se. I just thought it might be a good opportunity if Neil looked at, if we look at point 223, which is item 10, I suggested, I think, 6 items, which may... I know you've shared it with me and the Chairman, what the outcome of that, but I thought it might be worthwhile just to share with the other members of the committee where those issues are better placed, so to speak. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yes, so I communicated that upon review, a lot of these fell under other committee remit and therefore weren't appropriate to be placed on the work programme for this committee. The ones that have been added to the work programme, which members can see in the the papers, and I will discuss those during that item.
Thank you very much. Item 5 is our housing strategy development and consultation. And we say good evening to Mark and Debbie, who will be giving the presentation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So this is the second time that this item's come to the committee. We had a meeting in June where councillors made comments prior to the draft. Since that time, the draft housing strategy has been to cabinet, and we're now kind of in the middle of our consultation process. That's a 10-week consultation, which will finish on the 26th of September, and the report is then due to be turned to cabinet on I think it's the 12th of November, and then to full council on, I think, the 13th of January. I wasn't intending to go through lots of detail about the strategy itself again, because we did that at the last committee. But just very briefly, there are 5 key priorities in the strategy, and they're all sort of underpinned by 2 major themes, really, which are really around how we come out of the sort of COVID situation and the impact that that's had on housing, and also the sort of climate change up the agenda and how that impacts on housing. The priorities themselves are really around the increased investment in both affordable housing and in the standard of housing including in the council sector, but also looking at how we regulate in the private sector as well, or rather have things around selective licensing and those type of things, and working with landlords more generally, and then the implementation of the social housing white paper and what that means for our relationship with social housing tenants, which is another separate item on the agenda this evening in terms of the consultation and engagement plans. The final item is around the independent living, which really is related to our actions in relation to homeless households, but also vulnerable groups. And in terms of the consultation, we've got quite a wide process. There's an online survey. I think in your report it says there were 57 responses. That's now up to 75 and still counting, so we're getting a reasonably good response there. And we've had quite a lot of sort of online groups with people and various groups that we're going through as part of that process. So there's been, for housing, we've had sort of frontline staff in the homelessness and advice and private sector sections of the council, and there'll be another session with staff related to housing management and both the buildings and people side of that. And then various other groups with voluntary sector organisations, homelessness forum, we had the landlords forum today, we've got some sessions with service users as well. There's a couple with various council tenants, and a couple of our voluntary sector organisations are also hosting groups for us. So a fairly sort of extensive programme there. The kind of findings from that, obviously, we're sort of collating as we go along. But I just wanted to sort of pull out some of the sort of key themes from that. I think in terms of sort of general comments, there's certainly been a few things around people wanting to understand a bit more about the specifics of sort of measurable targets and that type of thing. There's been so there's been a number of sort of comments around the sort of local approach within the strategy and relating that to specific groups within the community as well, and kind of understanding some of the sort of cultural sort of dimension there. On the place shaping agenda, I think probably the main things to come out of that were really a need around a stronger focus on sustainability and the sort of other types of support needed to go alongside housing, so concerns around noise and traffic and pollution and availability of GPs and those sorts of things, and also something around a need to sort of build stronger communities. On affordable housing, probably the main concern, and that's something that's reiterated in the strategy itself, is that housing is truly affordable for people. There's concerns around the amount of time that people wait on the housing register. And a number of people mentioned things around us working more closely and developing our relationship with housing associations, and some specifics around that were really for us to work closely around under occupation in stock and making the best use of stock there, as well as considering new build housing. On improving housing standards, I think there was some concern around the sort of quality and space. There's things raised around the number of properties in the borough and the numbers of flats as opposed to houses, and some of the things that are really very sort of difficult issues in an area that's as dense as densely the prices of properties and the cost of building houses as opposed to flats, and things that are really kind of knotty problems in an area such as this. Overcrowding came up again. There's a number of times things have been mentioned around liaison with tenants and people both before they move into homes, so those who are in temporary accommodation, around sort of managing a tenancy when they move in, and also when people, the first few months after they've moved in, to sort of settle them in properly in terms of trying to sustain tenancies better. On supporting independent living, there were a couple of things raised around needing a focus on both disability and older people, and in particular looking at disability for those who are sort of younger age disabled, and making more accessible accommodation available. And things about working upstream, and there was also mention about trying to get people from JCP working alongside us as well, so that we're sort of tackling debt issues and things at the same time as housing. Just very quickly, unsustainable debt is a concern. People raised issues around mental health problems, and they highlighted a big increase in sort of comorbidity issues around sort of drug and alcohol problems, and mental health together was specifically mentioned. A number of people see the move towards DAHA accreditation in relation to domestic abuse as a positive move. And yes, I think I'll leave it at that there. That's obviously just a taste of the sort of comments that are coming through, and there will be a sort of full report on the consultation that will accompany the papers to Cabinet in November.
Thank you very much, Debbie. I invite questions from members. Councillor Gardner.
A couple of things. On page 14, it says up to the 1st of September, the online survey had generated 57 responses. I hope you've got more since then. Yeah, it's 75 at the moment. That's still quite poor.
Sorry.
Isn't it? It's still quite poor.
It's obviously not a huge number, but I wouldn't say it was tiny either. I'm getting people to respond to those types of surveys is not easy. So I wouldn't see it as a necessarily poor response. I mean, obviously, the more people that we get responding, the better. But I still think that it is quite a significant response still. And of course, there's quite a lot of other engagement work that we're doing as well, that we're trying to involve people in. But I do take the point that we would prefer it if we were able to reach out.
We all would, I think.
Yeah.
Also on table 1, when you've got affordable housing, how did you explain what affordable housing was? Because I'm just trying to think. My son, who lives in Shepherd's Bush, can afford his rent of over £2,000 a month. But my other son, who isn't very well, certainly couldn't afford that. So how do you explain to people what affordable housing is? Because a lot of people think affordable housing is social housing and the rents that go with that.
Yeah. In terms of the online survey, there's a questionnaire on there, and I think for each of it goes through how much people agree or disagree with each of the priorities, and for each of the priorities there's a sort of condensed bit of information that tries to summarise what's in the housing strategy, and the full housing strategy is also available on there. And I mean, those documents, I'm trying to remember what it actually says about affordable housing on there. It probably doesn't go into a great deal of detail about what that means. Within the strategy itself, it certainly talks about different types of affordable housing, and talks about social rent and London affordable rent, and makes clear that there are different types of affordable housing that are aimed at different people, and that part of what the strategy is aiming at is to get more provision at those lower rent levels. But I mean, I take the point. Affordable housing is a complex area, and really, you could easily spend an entire strategic document talking about how that works and how affordability works, and people have made entire careers about what affordability means. So it's not an easy one to get across in a sound bite, unfortunately.
Councillor Gardner, do you have a supplementary, or are you happy with the answer? Okay. Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse my voice, I'm recovering from a cold. Councillor Gardner has asked a few questions. I was coming on to. First of all, about the place shaping part of this. I think I've mentioned this before, and also it's good to see that it's come back through the consultation. It's on page 14 at the bottom, and as you mentioned yourself, about the provision for GPs and schools. Because I think I've mentioned that as well in terms of previous meeting. Also, I was wondering how we can incorporate that, if that's possible. That's something that's going to be done, which also brings on another question. But also about overdevelopment within areas. I mean, obviously we've got this zoning thing that's sort of hanging over us as well. So there's concerns with that and how we prevent overdevelopment and make sure the infrastructure is there for schools, for doctors and dentists and the things that should be nearby. I understand that it's not directly associated with this, but there is an association, and residents through the consultation have raised that as well. So that's good to see. Affordable have come through already. On page 10, it's the second to last bullet point. I don't know about this. A band C energy rating. Obviously, the aim really is to sort of AA plus or whatever it is on thing. I'm not sure how we can be aiming for better on that. It's just as a note that I saw that. Sorry, Chair, I just wanted to through these. On page 13, sort of linked to what Councillor Garver was saying about the responses. We're now at 75. The social media aspects, obviously the reach and then the link clicks, is that clicking to the questionnaire or is that something else? I wasn't entirely sure. If that is still coming through to that, why is it sort of dropping off? I know you're sort of getting down to at the time it was 57. And then sort of finally to this moment, I just wanted to confirm in terms of, this is probably a question for Democratic Services, with the consultation over, is we actually getting this back before it goes to Cabinet? To actually look at the sort of the final draft before it goes?
Neil, would you like to answer, please?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Parley. No, so this would be the last opportunity for the committee to formally consult on the document.
Right.
And so one of the recommendations at the beginning of the report is that this committee provides comments for inclusion in that report to Cabinet.
Okay, because I was just wondering in terms of what we get from residents, how we get maybe some oversight to that potentially.
Debbie might be able to expand on that potentially.
Okay. I think the intention is that as I said, the consultation closes on the 26th, and obviously I've sort of given a flavour of what's come through from other aspects of the consultation, but clearly I can't kind of report on that fully until it's come to the end of that. In terms of the sort of other things that you raised, the sort of provisions of schools and GPs and overdevelopment. I think certainly I can reflect some of the concerns both in the consultation report and perhaps also look at boosting some of the wording in the strategy that talks about some of those concerns around the sort of other services. Beyond that, I don't think there's anything that we can sort of add to the strategy at the moment other than sort of recognising that those are concerns, and it's obviously something that falls very sort of firmly within the sort of planner's remit as well as housing. The Band C energy rating, I think I take the point on that, but there are a lot of properties that aren't at Band C yet, and I think it's looking at sort of tackling the worst of those, and I think that kind of fits with a sort of overall approach that the government's taken as well, that started to sort of tighten up bit by bit in terms of where those bandings go. There's certainly work across London that the council's been involved with as well that talks about Band B, and I think this is it's really a kind of starting position, and we can see that that's going to sort of continue to be on agendas as we go forward. The social media question, if I'm honest, I'm not entirely clear on some of those things myself at the moment, and some of the report that I've had back about social media needs to be amended because it didn't give me everything I wanted. But certainly there are sort of different forms of social media that have been used. So I think the main ones are Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. I think there are one or two other things as well, like Nextdoor, but I don't think there's so much that's come from that. And I think there were some generic posts, and there was also an advertisement that went out. So I think, some of the data is just about how many people have actually accessed those posts on a device. Some of them are where people have accessed the same posts on multiple devices, so that sort of bumps it up a bit more. And then other things are where they've actually clicked on a link to look at something in there.
Councillor Farley, do you wish to follow up?
Thank you. With regards to that, was just trying to understand what that was driving and where it was going. Essentially, I mean, there's obviously a lot of activity in terms of trying to get the consultation information out. I was wondering one at the bottom about the tenant and leasehold service user workshops. How are they being promoted, or being encouraged to come along to them? And where are they? Are they here?
Well, because of the situation that we're in at the moment, all of the consultation events have been online, and that includes the tenants and leaseholder workshops. Essentially, we've got a list of tenants and leaseholders that have been contacted in the past through other types of consultation, who've basically said that they would be happy to be involved in further consultations. And we've invited people on that list to be involved in the consultation. So that's essentially where the tenants and leaseholders workshops have come from. Was there? Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. If I could just ask a quick question myself as well. The report which I read has mentioned 4-bedroom properties being in big demand. When I read the report, I saw no mention of bringing back in use empty properties, and I was just wondering if that's being considered as part of the strategy, and also whether that can be incorporated as part of the buyback programme. If we are buying back properties at full market value, there must be some consideration given to empty properties, which we could probably get a lot cheaper and bring back into use, some of which have been derelict and empty for many years. And if I could also ask on the consultation itself, a lot of our housing estates have notice boards in communal areas. Now, has this strategy also been displayed in those areas, so it's highly visible to residents on those estates?
Empty properties, I mean, certainly we would like to bring back empty properties as much as we can do. I think there's a lot of empty property work is quite intensive in terms of staff time and quite long processes to bring them back. So they do tend to be working on sort of specific properties over considerable periods. I think empty properties is something that's on our agenda to look at a bit more, and certainly part of the strategy talks about kind of further strategic work in a number of areas, one of which is sort of private sector strategy generally, which would sort of pick up on some of the points around empty properties. Take the point about the buyback programme, and we'd certainly kind of look at that. The advertisements on estates, I don't think we have done any of that, have we? No.
So, yes, sorry, the microphone. If
No,
you just say what you said just then for the benefit
yeah,
of those watching.
yeah, no, they were not put up in the notice boards. The document, it's a very large one to put up in the notice board.
If I could just clarify the point I made, I was referring to a poster advertising the consultation rather than the actual consultation document.
No.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chairman. You've already mentioned yourself 4-bedroom houses. Certainly with my planning hat on, so to speak, I know there's not a lot of 3s and 4 bedrooms coming down the pipeline, so to speak. And particularly with permitted development, we see 1s and 2s and sort of party if there's a couple of 3-bedroom flats within a complex. I just wondered what mechanisms you might think can be employed to increase the supply of 3s and 4s. I was particularly curious, is there a mechanism for inducing or encouraging, shall we say, existing tenants of 3s and 4-bedroom houses who no longer need a property of that size to actually downsize? And also, just for a point of clarification, really, I suppose, on page 15, I think one of the comments that have been picked up is the fact that it says some needing 3 bedrooms would accept 2s. I know of a couple of families in my area who were in similar situations. In fact, I know a family who was in a 2-bedroom who was eligible for a 4. But my understanding, I mean, they are a band A. My understanding, if they accept a 3, they would go down to band B, and their priority date, so to speak, or their start date would start again. So at the moment, correct me if I'm wrong, but at the moment as the system stands, there's no inducement to do that, even though they would like to do it, and it would probably solve a council issue as well. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, so 3s and 4s, the main mechanisms are the things that the processes that we use for affordable housing generally. So certainly we work with our planning colleagues and with developers and have the strategic housing market assessment shows that there's a need for larger properties, and we do work with them to try to make sure that we can get larger properties as much as possible, and where we have our conversations with housing associations, we also stress the need for that as well, and then also looking at our own development going forward. We're looking at where we might be able to find opportunities to do that. There may well be some other more innovative ways that we can look at that as we go forward. Whether in some instances it may be possible to merge properties, bring 2 together from larger properties. Ones that have been sort of split up into HMOs could possibly look to be brought back. We also look at properties when they become void to see whether some of those are suitable for extending. So there's some scope there, but it does tend to be quite a piecemeal thing, just looking to find opportunities for a few properties here and a few properties there for where we can get that extra supply. We have also looked at some of the things around allocations, and we do have an incentive scheme for under occupiers, which does produce a fair amount actually, but quite a regular supply. And we've recently looked at changing the incentive structure a bit as well, so that helps to encourage. And we had a recent change also with the allocation policy around being able to offer some people who need a larger home. So if they had a need for a 4-bed, they could be offered a 3-bed. And I think some people would be prepared to take that option. We'll never allow that to a point where a property is statutorily overcrowded, but we'll accept it up to a point. The strategy also talks about a kind of more thorough review of the allocation policy going forward, and I think there probably would be some value in going right back to basics again and looking at the allocation policy in a more kind of fundamental way, to see whether there are some tweaks there that we can start to introduce to meet need more appropriately.
Could I come in quickly, Councillor Bridges?
Yes, of course.
Just to add to that, as part of the consultation that we've been doing with housing associations, and actually we've specifically met with housing associations one-on-one. And so we've gone straight to their leadership, and we've pulled them in with myself and Debbie and some colleagues, and we've really we've really tried to understand what they think their role is in the borough, and actually what they think the council's role is as well. And part of that has been around them challenging us, and likewise us challenging them around, well, actually we do need larger properties. Actually, the council is actively we have a number of schemes to make sure people are in the right size property for their need, overcrowded and under occupation. And so actually, how do we work closely with our housing association colleagues to actually we're all working towards that goal. So if someone is under occupied with, let's say, Paradigm or Guinness, actually how do we work with them so we can swap tenants? And through that, actually, I mean, the consultation has been very useful in order to build very operational links with that level of that senior level of housing associations that should help us really embed the strategy when it goes live.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Chapman, do you wish to follow up?
No, that's excellent. Thank you.
Councillor Barnes?
Thank you, Chairman. That's really helpful to know, actually. Really pleasing to know. I have a couple of questions, Debbie. On page 12 at point 11, it's mentioned about that there's a big risk of the increased private rented sector evictions. Could you just give me a rough idea of how big a risk that is, if you've got any idea of that? And under supported independent living, does that also include disabled? Because I am just subbing today, so I'm not sure if that comes under that. And under page 13, the landlord forum that you had today, could you just give me an idea on how well that was attended, and have we got our vision and information across to as many landlords as possible?
Right. First of all, the independent living does include disabled people, and it is one of the areas where we do want to do some more work going forward around that. The private rented sector evictions, it's difficult to say how much of an increase there'll be. I think before we started before we completed the strategy, we were also doing some work trying to model need going forward and looking at homelessness presentations and how we thought they were going to go. And the assumption that we were working on, I think, was a 20% increase during the year. We saw a quite significant jump in people coming through the door in July after the previous stay for the start came to an end to the point where they would actually start to turn up at the council. In August, it wasn't as great as in July, so I think there was a big blip, and then it started to drop off again. Although the numbers are significantly up from where they were before, but how that kind of pans out over a longer period, I think is still a little bit wait and see. And there are some other aspects of homelessness where we have seen a falling off. So, for instance, the last couple of months we've not seen so much in the way of rough sleepers. So some may, one may balance out the other to some extent, and Mark might want to add a bit.
Yeah, we every month we track exactly why we're placing people into temporary accommodation and when they're coming into our office, and then we try and work it back to work out whether we could have intervened earlier. As Debbie says, our court evictions, we knew it was going once the courts reopened in end of June, beginning of July, and so from the middle of July onwards, we had it did increase. And so, just for example, in August, for example, we've placed 20 families into temporary accommodation because they've been evicted through the county court. That doesn't reflect the total numbers that we've got coming through the front door, because obviously our first aim is to try and prevent homelessness and try and work with the landlord, but also then look at alternative options rather than going right into the private rented sector. If the committee wishes, we can sort of at a later date maybe produce a bigger report on of sort of the homelessness demand coming through our door, and actually as part of our homelessness and rough sleeper strategy, actually monitoring that and really trying to understand what our need is. That's a sort of a key deliverable on that. It's still one of our biggest reasons for placements into temporary accommodation. And we've got to be honest about that. We will try and work with landlords as much as we can to prevent an eviction, but in a lot of occasions the landlord wants to sell the property, they have family moving back in, and there's nothing we can do to prevent. Obviously the biggest other area of eviction of sort of B&B bookings is family and friends as well. So a family, maybe a daughter has outgrown a family property, and unfortunately the relationship has broken down. We haven't received as many asylum applications as we thought we were going to, and so actually that means, when I say that, I mean the Home Office has made a positive determination on an asylum claim, and so they move out of an asylum property and then make an approach to the local authority. So that's lower than we thought that was going to be, but we have received a higher than usual approaches for domestic abuse. And we are concerned about the domestic abuse clients. That's just the numbers we've got coming through at the moment. And so we've got a number of work streams that we are looking at, and maybe we can sort of provide an update. We'll come back to one of the panels later on. In regard to the landlord forum, it was very good today. The invite went out to in excess of about 600 letting agents and landlords. The attendance was, Debbie, was it 20 to 30? Do we think?
I think it was, but to be honest, we're in the process of writing up the report from that. And when you look at it on screen, you just see a few people on your screen rather than the whole list. So I don't actually know how many it was, but I think that's probably a fair estimate.
And we were challenged. We have to be honest. It was a challenging session that we had. Landlords really, what the themes that came across was communication, and actually landlords wanting to be able to contact all council departments in a very much as we can walk around the civic centre and speak to each other. I think what came across was there was frustration with some landlords. Well, actually, I just want to speak to someone in council tax. I just need to speak to someone in the housing advice team. So we said we would take that away. It was the role of the council being the leader in the borough came across very strongly as well. And actually, what is our responsibility to not only supporting landlords but supporting tenants as well? So a big theme came across. Well, actually, we especially if they're coming through our homeless prevention service, and maybe a new tenant, they're moving into the property for the first time. Actually, what support do we give that tenant to settle into the property? There were some challenging questions on universal credit, and actually the challenges landlord have directly with them. But it was a very positive session. It was a 2-hour forum today. We've taken away a lot of really interesting points that some of them will go into the strategy. And actually, what we've probably done as well is that we've sort of, not only do we want to carry on doing the landlord forum, but we think we need to start subgroups as well. Actually, because some landlords were really very interested in getting involved on a more day-to-day level, that operational level, about how we can improve services. And so actually that's something we want to continue. So yeah, a challenging session, but a rewarding session for both council officers and for the landlords who attended.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barnes, would you like to follow up briefly before I move on? Or? No. Okay. Mark, thank you for your suggestion of having an update in the future. I think that would be valuable to this committee. Do you have a specific timescale when you feel it could come back to this committee? Or?
We can do that in the autumn. That's absolutely fine. Yep.
If you could liaise with Neil, who in turn will liaise with myself and the Labour lead, we can work out a programme that's suitable for the committee. Thank you. Councillor Farley, and then we'll finish with Councillor Gardner because time's marching on. Councillor Farley, please.
Thank you, Chair. On page 11, I was trying to get some clarity on what the outcome, or the ideal outcome would be for where you've got investigating funding for the traveller site. I know the one that West Drayton's at 20 plots, is it, something like that? It's not a great deal. I was wondering if there's any more, what the delivery aspect of that funding is meant to do, and also within this is about sort of touching on things like making sure that properties, the kitchens, the bathrooms are maintained or upgraded. I've visited some residents recently, over the last few months, where the kitchens and bathrooms are of an age, shall we say, and just make sure that sort of thing is maybe incorporated in here in some way. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So at the moment, I mean, essentially what we're doing is talking to the GLA about grant funding that they make available for traveller sites, which, well, it's part grant funding, and there'll be some match funding from the council involved in that as well. And currently it's at an exploratory stage where they're going to look in more detail about what potentially could or couldn't be funded. So essentially we're talking about the buildings on the standings by the caravans, and whether, I mean, at the moment I think either refurbishment options or looking at whether there can be new build is being looked at, and we haven't got a clear steer yet from the GLA about what their funding could or couldn't cover. So we're kind of looking at that before we can really go any further with that. But I think there's a range of different things that are being looked at. I think the steer we had from them is that essentially their funding is about the accommodation rather than some other things that ideally we might want to add on as well. But that's probably about as far as that's gone at the moment, and even that is not solid. They're looking at whether that funding can be sort of flexed a bit to cover some other sort of infrastructure as well.
Councillor Farley, do you wish to follow up briefly?
I think you just on the kitchens and bathrooms refurbishments and ensuring their main. Thank you.
I'll take that, Chair.
Yep.
We are implementing a planned programs for kitchen and bathroom replacements. This year we've commenced with a 250 unit replacement, and that's evolving. That's all based on our asset database, which prioritises replacements. That's supported by individual assessments from the inspection team. So it is in the strategy for developing and the HRA business plan.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
On page 15, 6th bullet point down, it says a need for more upstream work to be done with hospitals to prevent homelessness on discharge. I mean, that is a bit of a worry anyway. But how long do you think before you can get that rolling? Because I know that people have come out of Hillingdon Hospital and Riverside and places like that, and they've had nowhere to live at all.
I can answer that question. So we have a good relationship with Hillingdon Hospital. We're actually at the moment looking at how we can co-locate staff actually to support sort of the on-site sort of ward teams there. There's regular meetings that our frontline housing officers have, and this is in the homeless prevention team. And the hospital sort of it's almost, I wouldn't say a back door as such, but the hospital can get in touch with us very easily if there's a delayed discharge or someone who needs to move out. We're very keen that there is not delayed discharge. And so, and it's not just about us sort of asking for a client to be referred. It's also about training hospital staff to ask the right questions when someone is admitted to hospital rather than them being discharged. Now we have to remember they're health professionals, we're housing professionals, and actually they're there to make someone better. They're not there to sort of assess homelessness. And so actually what our presence is there for is just to help nudge and help to support them in sort of in the service that they give, asking the right questions that then they can highlight someone to us at an earlier stage, rather than it gets to the discharge day and someone says they've got nowhere to go.
Councillor Gardner, do you wish to add anything further?
No, thank you. That's actually made me feel quite a bit better. Cheers.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the members for their questions on this topic. We'll bring this to a close, but before we do, you'll note that on the agenda that we are requested to provide formal comments as a committee. So I would welcome any comments that you feel that should be included, but for me personally, As I mentioned earlier, the empty properties, I believe, is an essential one that should be included. And also Mark, in his response to Councillor Chapman, I believe hit the nail on the head with the relationship with housing associations. I would like to see more clear communication channels with our housing associations. They have housing stock as we do, and I feel if there is opportunity within their housing associations that residents and tenants feel they want to downsize, then they should be able to do so or upsize, whether it be our sector or the housing association. There needs to be more joined up thinking from that front, I believe. So I hope the committee would endorse that as well as part of the consultation. I'd also like to place on record the committee's thanks to the officers for the work they've done so far on this. It is a very good consultation, and we look forward to the responses, albeit it has been low to date, but I'm encouraged to know that Debbie, as she said earlier, that the numbers have gone up to in their 70s. And we also have quite a broad range of different sectors, not only council housing but private housing as well. So the mixed responses so far is also encouraging. So those are my comments from me personally. Are there any other comments that members wish to add to be included formally? Councillor DeVille?
I'd just like to know how long our properties are empty before we take them back, because I know of some that have been empty for 2 years.
I think the opportunity will come later in the year on our work programme when we'll be looking at empty properties as a topic, as an information item, sorry. So I think that'll be the opportunity to ask the question then, Councillor DeVille. Any other members? No? Okay. Are you happy to take those points, Neil, as they are? In which case, thank you very much to the officers for their attendance. If you aren't speaking on any other items later on, then you're free to go whenever you wish to do so. We move on now to our annual complaint and service monitoring report, and we welcome Ian again for his annual report. So whenever you're ready to do so, please give your presentation, Ian.
I can't remember how many years I've been doing this now, Councillor. I think
I've been for all of them.
Yeah, quite a few. Thank you. At the last policy overview committee meetings last year, councillors asked that you wanted information over a longer period, not just a couple of years, so you wanted over 3-4 years. So I provided data that you can now look at over 5 years. The other thing you also asked for is information relating to the Ombudsman decision. So you wanted every single Ombudsman decision that was made in that year to be provided. So this report provides you with that information. It also provides you with high-level data analysis of all complaints, compliments and members' inquiries that we've received. And what I've also done is shared with you the information that's across the whole council. So every other service area that I'm providing a report from will contain the same data. Next year, things will change because the select committee structures have changed, and therefore I think you need more information in terms of waste services, green spaces, planning. So you'll get more of that next year, but not this year, because the way it's set up for this year was primarily resident services, and that's the reason why you've got the information as it is. Going through the report, I'll sort of canter my way through it. I'll start with Appendix B, which contains all the high-level information. And in terms of the information, that number of informal complaints has risen from 2,339 for last year to 2,587. So it's a fair chunk of a rise in terms of informal complaints. In terms of the formal Stage 1 complaints, the total number received across the whole council is 789, which is roughly 30% of 2,587. So what's happening is the bulk of the complaints are at the informal stage. It's reduced then at the Stage 1 stage, and then it's reduced even further at the Stage 2, so where you've got 42 in total, which is 5% of 789. So the complaint process is doing what it's designed to do. So you start at the informal process where you end up with loads, and then it reduces as it goes through the stages. The Ombudsman Investigation, in total last year, they dealt with 34. That is quite a small number, but it's not surprising because what the Ombudsman did during the middle of last year, for 5 months of that year, they chose not to undertake any investigations. So effectively what happens is you'll end up with probably more Ombudsman decisions this year whilst they try and catch up. In terms of compliments, that's again risen from the previous years, from 301 to 502. I know colleagues from repairs and housing were here generally. They had 132 compliments in total, But there was one area across the council that raised more compliments than any other area, and that was wildflowers. Elected members as well as residents supplied more compliments in that one single theme than any other area. And I think in this sort of day and age, where people are looking for something that is attractive and gives pleasure, that certainly caught people's eye. In terms of members' inquiries, the number of members' inquiries is down from last year to this year, from 11,000 odd to 9,900. I think COVID has had an impact on in that, in terms of the restrictions in place and what people could and couldn't do during big chunks of the year. So that figure is down, but I have a feeling that over the year to come it will start to rise. There is one thing I need to bring to councillors' attention, and it's something that I'm doing some work on, is that I've identified through help of actually a councillor, is that when you submit a member's inquiry, if you don't provide an address, or if my member of staff makes a mistake and they don't put down an address, the computer is looking for an address. So if it doesn't find an address, it automatically allocates it to the Civic Centre, and as a result is then allocated to Uxbridge South. So somehow I've got to find a way of identifying these non-location inquiries, how to get around that. I'm not quite sure that's going to be so easy, because our system is geared towards a location. It's looking for that. So it's something that I need to do over the next few months and come up with a solution to it. One thing I need to let members know is that we are looking at a new system for recording members' inquiries. It's a system that's being looked at. It's called GOS. We're nowhere near ready to roll it out yet. There's quite a lot of work to do, but we are looking to move on to that platform. In terms of, if you look across the council, where's the learning, where's the complaints coming from, there are two themes that will emerge every time, and it's year on year. People complain about communications, either the poor communication, inaccurate communication, delays in communication. Generally, communication, that's a big area. Closely followed by delays. Our residents generally, if we say we're going to do something by X date, they expect it to be done by X date. We don't do it. Winds people up is probably not the right words, but it frustrates people, and it's something that work that we need to do more of across the council. It's those two themes that come up regularly. The other thing that I've noticed of late is that there are more people calling the complaints team, and one of the reasons they're calling is they can't get through for whatever reason, and it's become an issue. What I've done a little bit of work with colleagues in the contact centre is that what appears to have happened, so when we compared data for the first 3 months of last financial year with this financial year, we've had something like 19,000 more inquiries, more telephone calls than we have in the last year. So there is clearly an upward trend in terms of people ringing, and I think the nature of where we're at the moment with the restrictions with COVID, I think more people are on the phone. So that's an issue that hopefully will reduce as time goes on. In terms of Appendix C, which I guess the councillors here will be interested in, which is housing complaints. In terms of housing complaints, the volume of informal complaints for housing has gone up from 457 to 568, so a fairly hefty rise in terms of informal complaints. The volume of Stage 1 complaints has gone up again from 177 to 231. The volume of Stage 2 complaints has gone down from 31 to 22, and the volume of Ombudsman investigations has also gone down from 15 to 5. I think what I would say is that some of the reasons why the increase in complaints has come up is it tends to be in the repairs area, it tends to be in the housing area. In terms of repairs, it's more about leaks, mould. Those things come up quite regularly. People saying, can you get someone there to come and deal with it and quickly? When it comes to the housing area, it tends to be people's challenges towards the social housing allocation policy. Some of it you've heard from colleagues, and it is about how long people are having to wait before they can actually get on to a house that's of if they're a 4-bed need, they may be living in a 2-bed. How long are they having to wait to actually before they can actually have a property which is suitable for their needs? There's a fair number of those that come up. In terms of the complements, it's gone up from 92 to 132 in terms of housing. That's sort of a quick run through in terms of housing, but I think one of the things that councillors may be interested to know is in terms of the other areas. You've got waste services, which if you look at, when it comes to members' inquiries, a massive volume of 50% of members' inquiries is all in the waste area. But when it comes to complaints area, it's actually quite a small area of complainants. It's not, it's not up in the housing area. And what you can take some assurance for example, if you look at page 54 for planning, you'll find the total number of Ombudsman Investigation for planning that we dealt with last year. And actually, there are very few in terms of numbers. And if you look at green spaces, if you look at page 53, again, it's a big area of inquiries from elected members. But in terms of complaints, there are very few there are very few Ombudsman investigations that are actually dealt with, 4, I think, in total last year. And if you look at page 54, you've got the waste figure. So there was 1 waste investigation by the Ombudsman in total for the whole of last year. So the committee can take some assurances. So from the other areas which I haven't provided much data on, is that you're not getting much complaints coming through. And where the complaints are coming through, you'll find that the Ombudsman have chosen not to investigate almost all of those. It's a funny term they use when they say did not investigate. They actually did look at it, but what they're saying is that there isn't enough merit in the actual complaint for them to spend any more time in terms of investigating it. Personally, I think the Ombudsman ought to say what they've actually found, but that's not the way the Ombudsman operates. I think that's my quick sort of canter through the various bits that I've got. I'm very happy to deal with the areas of work that you cover in this committee or any other questions that you've got on any other areas, if you so wish.
Thank you very much. We'll start with Councillor Gardner.
I don't understand the MEs broken down by ward at all, to be perfectly honest with you, because we get a list of the MEs for all the councillors once a month, and it says Uxbridge South. Okay, fair enough. I mean, maybe some of mine have gone in there because there's just general inquiries about things. Miscellaneous is quite a lot as well. Can you explain what miscellaneous is? Why haven't you popped them in?
I believe it mentioned it in the report, Councillor Gardner, with the miscellaneous was MPs, the Mayor's office, and I believe there was some other. It's mentioned at the bottom of the page.
Oh, sorry, I missed that.
Let me just have a look for you.
I can't understand the...
Page 21, last point.
Sorry, sorry, I can't understand the disparity between the members' inquiries list that we get every month and then what it says on here, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, there's thousands out in some of them. Can you explain?
Yeah, it's fairly straightforward actually, Councillor. What happens is the system that we use to record members' inquiries is a system we call Onyx. So the same data that you receive on a monthly basis from Democratic Services is the same data that I use in terms of wards. What I need to do is I need to go back and look at the actual the location issue, which is causing an issue in terms of the numbers. So whilst the members' inquiries where you submitted by name and you've given a location, that figure is correct. That's provided to you by Democratic Services. So that's absolutely right, and you should treat that as the correct figure. But when it comes to ward, what happens there is that you've got in that figure also where there is an unassigned address, so there's no location, and that's what's causing causing the problem within the system. So what I've got to do is go back and try and identify where it needs to be apportioned to. So what will happen is over the next month and a half, probably 2 months, you'll get a different figure which will provide you with data which breaks it down slightly at a lower level, so you'll be able to see how it's broken down.
Councillor Gardner? No? Okay. Could I just also ask again, the ward boundaries, as you know, will be changing next year. So all these figures are just going to go all over the place. Are you prepared for that, and are you ready to hit the ground running as and when those boundaries change?
The honest answer is no, but we'll have to do some work on that.
Thank you. Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to dwell too much on the MEs, but yeah, they are looking particularly strange. I mean, I don't understand why necessarily Democratic Services uses the councillor and therefore tied to a ward, as to you're using a different system or you're using the same system. That, you know, if I, for example, report something and I haven't given a location, I am asked, where is this? Or, you know, what's it about? So I don't really understand why there's a gap between what I'm giving away and then the system somehow isn't recording that. Okay, human error, I understand, but it does seem a bit strange to me, based on my experience with members' inquiries, who are very, very, very good. They do ask if I do forget sometimes to give a location, and they will ask me. So that argument seems to me a bit strange in and of itself. So that's one thing. But also on the so going back to what you were saying about the Ombudsman and the does not investigate. When a resident receives that, does not. I mean, yeah, I'm just looking from the resident's point of view, how they react to that kind of sort of response. Is that the response they're getting? We did not investigate, or is it something that they're receiving has a bit more sort of detail to it? Thank you.
Yeah, both points. I'll deal with the easy one first, which is the Ombudsman investigation. What happens is where I've put down a summary is did not investigate. That's just, I've just picked out what the actual decision is. But what the Ombudsman will do, some of these decisions could be 5-6 pages. So what they'll do is they'll actually set out what the issue is, they'll set out what they've investigated, what the law is, and then they'll set out the decision. So what the council gets and what the complainant gets is a report, and it could be several pages which sets out the Ombudsman's decision. Where I find it odd is that the Ombudsman has clearly looked at it, they've clearly reached a decision, but then they then set down did not investigate. But for some some officers will actually see the Ombudsman decision. It's several pages. It's clear what they've reached a decision that they don't find in favour of the complainant, and that's why they say did not investigate. It's a funny term that's used, but actually I can assure you, Councillor, the report that the Ombudsman provides is often several pages. Sometimes it could be 20-30 pages, and it might say did not investigate, but actually it sets out the thinking why they've reached that decision. In terms of your first question, which is the members' inquiries thing, we get tons, councillors, where there is not an address in there. It tends to be statistical, where someone's asking statistical data, or they're sending in, raising inquiries but of a general nature. It could be a licensing inquiry. There are loads you get where there's just not an address is given, and that's what the problem is. The system looks for an address. That's what it's designed to do. So, for example, when I register a complaint, we use the same system. You have to put down an address. If you don't put down an address, it causes a problem. So it's the data that you get every month from Democratic Service. It comes from the same system, and it's the same. What I've just produced is through wards as opposed to individual members. If I produced it through individual members, you'll get exactly what you've got every month. It's just the way it works. So it's just the volume that we receive. And actually, to be fair, some inquiries that you make won't have an address. You'll be asking us something which is, you might say, well, can you tell us what the policy issue on this is, or can you tell us how many toilets you've got in this borough, or something like that. So you get quite a lot of that information. So there's tons of those, I'm afraid. And if you'd like to come and see, Councillor, I'm very happy to show you. Okay, welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Farley, yep.
Thank you, Chair. Just a follow-up on the Ombudsman. So, I haven't seen the reports, so I don't know what they look like necessarily. What I'm hoping is that these reports are not sort of filled with legalese and legal terms. They're quite, for the layman. I'm just because what I wouldn't like to think is that what's coming back is something that can't be understood by the average person if you're not a lawyer, for example. Thank you.
No, I can assure you, dead easy to read, and they're very straightforward. If you'd like, I can send you some.
I was just about to ask if you could send an example. That would be helpful, I believe.
If you would like, what I can do is, on page 53 and 54 are all the planning, waste, and green spaces. I've referred to them. I can send you all of them if you want to have a look at, and you can then see. You can see where I'm coming from, where they say did not investigate. I know they've investigated that. It's just a term they use.
I don't think we need all of them, but I'd say one or two, maybe one or two from different. Unless Councillor Wayne wants to do some nighttime readings.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments before we move on? If not, we shall note the report. Councillor Chapman to finish off. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just very quickly, I think from what you said at the end to Councillor Farley, you invited us if we wanted to have a look at Onyx and indeed have a look at GOS and see how they work. And if that was an invitation, I would personally like to take you up on that thing. Secondly, on a slightly lighter note, you mentioned that in terms of compliments, the largest number of compliments were wildflowers. I'm just curious, what percentage or number were in fact wildflowers? I'm sure my residents' association would like to know.
Yeah, in terms of the invitation, actually, at least 3 or 4 councillors have already come this year. You're very welcome. Just drop me an email saying, look, you've come, and we'd be delighted to sort of show you around. And I'm not quite so sure we'll be able to show you the GOS system because that's in sort of design at the moment. But Onyx, we can show you, how it works, and that's dead easy. And that's open to anyone who wants to come and visit. In terms of wildflowers, Councillor, I don't have the exact percentage figure, but I can give that to you when I get back. But it's high. It will be in excess of 100.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for your attendance, Ian. You may leave if you wish to do so. So we'll now move on to our next item, which is our first witness session for review, the engagement of tenants and leaseholders. Good evening to Rod and Marion. Whenever you're ready, please give your presentations.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to take you through just the headlines of this report, if I may, and Marion's going to pick up on the appendices towards the back end. The starting point is really the need for the landlord service, the council's landlord service, to have a documented involvement and engagement strategy. That really is the key here. Just working through the recommendations, you'll see that it is a requirement under the regulatory regime for social housing, for us as a social housing provider, to have such a document in place. I think it's important for the committee to look at the potential range of engagement options that may be available moving forward. And also to pick up on feedback from the witness sessions moving forward, and really take the opportunity at this very, very early stage to share your views as to what you would like to see in this engagement strategy moving forward. Ultimately, you are one of our key stakeholders, as are our tenants, as are our leaseholders. A little bit of background then. The council's landlord service is shortly to enter a new period of regulatory scrutiny. The driver for that was really the fallout from the Grenfell disaster. As I'm sure you've seen and read, there's a lot of emphasis now from government in terms of ensuring that residents in social housing are listened to and given easy access to make their views and contributions known. So ensuring that residents in social housing have a voice and are listened to really is key. And that really is the golden thread that runs throughout the new regulatory regime. Council's challenge then is really to have in place and align itself to the expectations of the regulator moving forward by, as I say, documenting an engagement and involvement strategy. So this really does present, I think, the committee with a real opportunity to shape the development of this strategy at such an early stage. So a real opportunity there. And as I said before, elected members really are one of our key stakeholders, as are our tenants and leaseholders, so we do want to take on board your views. A pictorial representation there in the report is a very simple hierarchy of involvement, which I thought would be helpful to take you through very, very quickly. Important to set out that in terms of engagement and involvement, there is really no one-size-fits-all. It is really about having accessible opportunities which are available to residents at a pace and a level which they find meaningful and helpful, really. So going back to that hierarchy of involvement, starting there from information at the bottom, moving up to consultation, involvement, collaboration, and right at the pinnacle there, empowerment. So at the very base of the hierarchy is good quality, timely information. Simple as that, really. And for many, that may well be enough. It's important to recognise that. It may well be enough for quite a wide group of residents, but it's important to note that the provision of information is really essentially a one-way, one-dimensional type approach. Within that level of the hierarchy, for example, we do produce an annual tenant and leaseholder report, and that sets out really how the council is performing in its capacity as a landlord, and last year's is due to be published this coming autumn. Moving up the hierarchy then, consultation obviously necessitates the provision of information but also feedback. At a very basic level is statutory consultation, where the law really sets a minimum bar and says to landlords when certain activities are going to change, when certain things need to happen, then this statutory approach to consultation is needed. But it is the bare minimum, and it is a legal requirement. We do get involved in a number of statutory consultation exercises. The Council's annual budget consultation is a good example. You've heard how Marion's team in one of the earlier reports got involved in the housing strategy consultation. And last year we got involved in some statutory consultation to do with our tenants across our sheltered housing schemes. So we do get involved with statutory consultation on a fairly regular basis. But we also ask for information, and we seek the views of tenants and leaseholders through surveys. Our STAR survey of tenants and residents, is undertaken to actually seek input to help us really shape our services and get perceptions of our services. We're due to have a survey kicking off fairly soon now, which will run from the autumn to the back end of the calendar year. And that really is about getting information from roughly about 10% sample base of our tenants and leaseholders. More recently, as some of you will be aware, we ran a successful consultation event, which is essentially still ongoing across two of our estates in the south of the borough in relation to regeneration proposals. The outcome of that exercise was very positive and resulted in the council committing to redevelop two relatively large estates in the south of the borough. And that proposal, I think, was successful for a number of reasons, but mainly because we used pretty much a big proportion of that hierarchy of involvement and engagement. So pitching opportunities for people to contribute, again, at a pace and level that they were comfortable with. So moving up to involvement now, by its very nature, that does imply that participation takes place within what I would call a positive communication climate, with a two-way flow of information. And again, moving up, the natural progression there is a more collaborative approach. And a collaborative approach, I think, really builds trust and capacity in your customer base as well. And then just pushing it very much to the top there on empowerment, pretty much at the pinnacle of the involvement hierarchy there, where you see greater levels of empowerment, but also control over what's taking place in terms of service delivery. So in summary terms, any engagement and involvement strategy really needs to set out the extent of the offer across that pyramid or hierarchy of engagement. I think it's important to share with committee that we are starting from a relatively low base here and now in terms of the extent of our involvement at the moment. In recent years, the council has pretty much operated what I would call at the lower end of that hierarchy, and the step change in approach that the regulator is looking for and we are looking for as a landlord service will certainly necessitate the council moving up that hierarchy of involvement in a managed way, but to give more choice in terms of those other layers of involvement that are potentially out there. The aim of developing then an engagement strategy in consultation with tenants, leaseholders, managers and stakeholders, and including recommendations from the select committee is really about helping to shape that involving strategy as we move forward. Our vision, because we're starting from a relatively low base, is to probably pace ourselves, but we're looking possibly developing a strategy that will move forward over a 3-year programme, and also to set out, shall we say, levels of involvement or time commitments, so that people can see, if I am going to get involved, and here's a menu of opportunities to get involved, is this something I could do for 10 minutes a week or 10 minutes a month, or is it 10 hours a week or 10 hours a month? So we can also pitch levels of involvement, a menu of involvement for people to see at a glance what they might be interested in. So I'm going to pause there and just hand you over to Marion to run through a couple of appendices. The last point I'd make, the pandemic's had an impact everywhere, not least in Marion's area and our involvement side. We are moving by necessity now to more, so we say, non-traditional ways of involvement. So we're doing a lot more over the computer, Teams, those sorts of things. Less face-to-face contact, but certainly moving forward, as restrictions start to move back a little bit, we're probably heading more towards a mixed economy. But we don't want to lose those advantages of more use of ICT that we've picked up over the last sort of 12 to 18 months. Thank you.
So I'll take you through the appendices. So Appendix 1 there, I'll talk you through what we currently do, what our current engagement framework is. So we have a number of engagement mechanisms that we use at the moment across the board. So first on, we have the Hillingdon Housing Forum that we refer to as the Senate. And from your notes, you'll see that this is an open forum to tenants and leaseholders, just a forum where people have the opportunity to get involved, work with us, maybe at that collaborative stage where we can work together to shape our services or influence the improvements or decisions that are made about services. We aim, at the moment, we usually would have about 20-30 representatives from across the borough, tenants and leaseholders, but we're aiming to increase that number as time progresses. We also have our database that we referred to, or that Debbie referred to earlier on, of where tenants have expressed an interest of working in partnership with us to improve our services. So this is where when we have consultations, that's our first point of call, because there's almost a no-brainer. They'll come back, or an amount of them would engage in the process. So we have that. What I'm trying to do from that point is even furthermore to break that down into special interest groups. So, for example, if we have, if Gary, for instance, wants to walk around his services, we could have people who have gone through repairs, who want to really influence the service that they received, maybe out of complaints or just compliments, how we all can work together and build on the service. We also have the Leaseholder Association that is run independently, and we work with them on a number of things, anything to do with landlord services. We work with them. They're a fully constituted group, and we sort of provide advice both ways to support, to provide advice and support when required. We also have our Hillingdon Disabled Tenants and Residents Association. Just to pick up on your point there, Councillor Barron, you did mention something with regards to Debbie around the strategy. So we do have this group that is not as active at the moment due to so many reasons where within these groups you have people that are driving forces behind them, and when they step back, things you tend to cave in. And so we're looking at capacity building this group again to build them up to a point where they can run themselves. Because prior to COVID, what we would do is organize the meetings for them, provide transport for them, and they would come and meet with managers within the council on different things. So that group is inactive at the moment, and the aim is to get that back up and running, and I'm sure they will be looking forward to working with as many service managers or members as possible in areas of interest. The Sheltered Housing Forum is another way we engage with our elderly residents living in our sheltered accommodation. We run, prior to COVID, we had quarterly meetings based on, they set the agenda about things that are important to them. And I work with them to get the speakers in or the managers in to talk about the services and get feedback that managers would take back to further improve their services. That's been put on hold for obvious reasons at the moment. They're a very delicate group, so we're looking to ease back meetings, based on government's advice. But at the moment, we've just put things on hold and just let the committee know that's where we are. We are in constant communication. So when they feel ready to kickstart, we will start up with them. And then also we have the TMO who manage their own activities as well. We've got the TRAs, the community groups, which I believe a lot of you probably are involved in at some point. And we work, they are traditional mechanisms of engagement, or one of those traditional mechanisms where they represent their communities, and I as a representative from customer engagement team, we go to those meetings, we support them in what they do, and just a two-way thing, working in partnership as well with them to make sure that the services that are important to them are shaped in the way they want it to be shaped and delivered to them the way they want it to be delivered to them. At the moment we have 3 TRAs that we fund, but we do have a number of them on the website that are affiliated with us. They're affiliated to the council. So for them to be affiliated, they need to have a constitution that covers key things that the council holds dear, to make sure that there's equality in there, to make sure that they have checks and balances within their finances. So we don't want to be associated with things that are not properly done. So we usually would request for a copy of their constitution, AGM minutes, and if we do receive invites and we are able to attend their meetings, we do as well. And we just support that. We just help as much as we can. We can't fund some of them, and because some of them are privately run and they do the funding themselves. So there are some where members pay fees towards the association, and for some we fund them. So, but we are there as a department just to support, or as a service just to support. We have helped set up a lot of TRAs where they're not being funded by us, but we do go out where we have maybe a councillor might call and say, I need something in my area. And we'll say, send us the details, and we work with them to achieve what they intend to achieve, coming together as a TRA. Most recently, we started the new tenants experience sessions. Well, not sessions at the moment. We intend to make those sessions, but at the moment it's a direct call to residents that have signed up to us, new tenants. So we follow the process from end to end, from when they become tenants to up to 6 or 8 weeks in the property, when they move into the property. So what we do, we carry out a survey with them, just looking at their viewing experience, how, what could we do better to improve our viewing experience. We have the first tenant visit, which takes place 4 weeks when they move into the property, and that's done by the housing officers. So we as the engagement team would go in there and find out, were you giving all the information? Did you understand your tenancy? We just try and find out as an independent eye into things, whether they were fully informed of what they were signing up for. Do they know what kind of tenancy they have? Is there anything within the process that we can change or improve? And I'm working with Melissa within the lettings team to look at what we can do with the information. So at the moment we're within the second quarter of it, and hopefully at the end of the second quarter we would produce a report that would inform how the services have been run and where improvements need to happen. So that's what we currently do. On the other side, Appendix 2, we've outlined, as Rod mentioned, options for engagement against the hierarchy of involvement. And as Rod said, it's good if a resident wants to be involved, they know what they're getting involved in, the time commitment within the involvement. So it's easy for them to say, okay, we could do it, but we could do it either way. I'm only free once a month, then, for 2 hours, and I can say, okay, maybe this is something, look at this, maybe once a month, 2 hours, you probably want to get involved in working with us to produce our annual report, or I only have 30 minutes. Okay, so if it's 30 minutes, you probably would be interested in just filling out surveys. We have armchair exercises, we call them, from the comfort of your own home. So going through the options, and this can also be done at their own pace, not at our own pace, a pace that is suitable to the resident. So they decide how and when they want to be involved, the frequency and the time commitment. So if you look look at Appendix 2, I have done it in the form of the hierarchy of involvement, so things that we currently do, and this is where we really need your input to work together with yourself as select committee to help shape this. And as Rod mentioned earlier on, we're starting from a low base, so we're looking forward to your comments as to how we can improve what's already been drafted out. So we've got engagement mechanisms where, from being informed, the things that people can be involved in. We also have within the consultation hierarchy where we provide information and feedback. We mentioned the STAR survey. We've run the first one. We're getting ready. We're preparing for the second lot, which Rod mentioned, that will take place in the autumn period. And thereafter, we will take a pause and come back in 2 years' time, review the service again to see how that has made a difference. So we could look at the trend of the service and where things have changed, improved, or deteriorated, as it may be. We'll continue to hold meetings, including virtual meetings. And again, time commitments around that has been highlighted. We also have our statutory surveys, for example, the housing strategy or the annual budget consultation that people can get involved in. We move on to the hierarchy of involvement. Again, we run the assemblies as a means of engagement mechanism. We haven't run an assembly for, pre-COVID for obvious reasons. And we're hoping to run one before the end of the financial year this year, hopefully in December. Just a light touch where residents will come together and just sort of welcoming them back and probably talk about what they would want to do in the year, in the next year, planning an agenda for the next year. We were intending to run the Disability Assembly. However, we do use the Middlesex Suite, and it's currently been used for as a test centre. So we're having issues around that at the moment. With them, we need space where people come in with their scooters, their wheelchairs. We want it to be accessible, and that's our only venue at the moment. So We have put that on hold and we'll review at a further date. I think we're going back to them in November when they review their use of the room. We also have the Carers Forum that we ran earlier this year that was done virtually and was very well attended. We're looking at other options. Meet the Manager, we've called it, where it's an opportunity for tenants and leaseholders, residents to come in and meet the manager of a service where they have a direct contact. And this can happen where a manager could be a guest at a meeting, someone else's meeting, or that manager would run that meeting and get service users in to discuss the service as a way of consulting and feeding back on, that constant mechanism of feedback, and improving the service, evaluating the service, just as another engagement method. We also have a community clubs that we're thinking of doing, which is like a light touch within, maybe on estates, where you could come out and meet your neighbours, if you like, as an intro of getting involved. And that's very flexible. You decide when and how. We can run a series of those sessions. We want to be at a stage where we're able to collaborate with our residents. I have down there IT focus group. I know the councils drive towards digital engagement, and one of the things we're thinking about is probably to have a group, an IT focus group, where people could look at the services that we offer. How we could run. We probably would run things from the libraries. It's in its formative stage, and that's where we're looking up to people in this committee, where you could help us build that. Your thoughts and your recommendations do matter, and we can work in partnership to make this work. We could look at the council's website. Is it accessible? Is it easily accessible? We could look at things like the font, the style. Someone with visual impairment, is it easy for you to read stuff off the website? We could, there's so many things we can do along that line. And again, the time commitments to that, people can make their decisions. We also have, at the moment, our annual report falls within the informative stage, where we inform the residents how well the council's been doing or how they've been performing. We want to get to a stage where we collaborate, where they influence how the report is being produced, the content, the style. What do you want to see in the report? We want to get to that stage where we're collaborating in producing that report, which should be what it is. But at the moment, we're delivering that on an informative stage, where we just produce the report based on what we think residents would want to know. There's also various activities to meet the 7 themes of the social housing white paper, and and that surely is just to ensure that landlord, also as a landlord, is compliant with the regulator's request, and this would also include establishing service standards. Again, the time commitment would vary, and those 7 themes within the charter is mainly around to be safe, to be safe in your own home. You want to know how well your landlord is performing, to have your complaints dealt with promptly, to be treated, for residents to be treated with respect, to have your voice heard by the landlord, to have a good quality home and neighbourhood to live in, and obviously to support residents in that first step to ownership of their property. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done around that, and we're looking to kickstart that hopefully as soon as we can. The final stage within the hierarchy is empowerment. At the moment, we do have the Housing Forum group, which is the Senate, and we, as explained in Appendix 1, and the aim is to probably get representatives from that group that would attend housing board meetings, so we can have a bridge between how information is shared and cascaded. But again, that's up to the select committee to help and guide us as to how we're going to work together to to produce a more robust engagement plan. Again, you know, there's a health and safety focus group, keeping in line with the regulators' requirements. And obviously this group will work with London Borough of Hillingdon to make sure high-rise blocks are compliant. Again, in light of Grenfell, there's an expectation on the landlord to do a lot of work around high-rise, and the aim there is to work with residents to make sure that we're compliant. At the same time, people living in those blocks understand the you know, what's the risk of being in a high-rise block, and how they could really comport themselves to reduce those risks. Again, we're looking at probably setting up scrutiny panels with already engaged residents to see how they could challenge us in the things that we do, similar to what we're doing here. You want to know what we're doing, how we're performing, things that we could work with those residents as well. Again, that's up for discussion and your thoughts on it. So that brings me to the end of the appendices, and we could take any questions if you have one.
Thank you. We'll start with Councillor Gardner.
Many residents in some of the estates, the Red Brick Estate, one that I know, and they feel quite isolated. What worries me is that when you've had virtual meetings, people with limited resources haven't been able to access things. Also, how many interpreters and translators do you have working within your teams? Because there are people that have problems understanding and speaking English. I'm just trying to work out, it's great to get as many people involved as possible, but what worries me is that the people that are left behind, because they have got limited resources, maybe they have problems with language, maybe they don't have the money to get computers, maybe they're just embarrassed to ask for help. So how are you going to cope with that?
So that falls within part of the strategy we're working towards is recognizing those barriers to engagement. And we know language is one of them. Like you mentioned, the Red Brick Estate, and I could give you a direct example. During our consultation prior to the redevelopment, the council itself has a service, a provider, DA languages that we can go to for any interpreting services, sign language, which we also use when we do the disability assembly. So we that's like a standing thing on all of our disability assembly. We have a BSL signer there for the residents at a table that will do the signing. So likewise with the Red Brick Estate, as you mentioned, during the consultation period, we had in-house interpreters, people within housing that attended every single engagement activity, and that really worked well. And we had other residents who came forward to act as interpreters for their neighbours. So it was something that worked beautifully, where residents were supporting one another, and we also had our staff member who was there on at every occasion to support with interpretation. And going to the virtual meetings that we ran, we did recognise that access to IT services was an issue for some people. What we did at that, to combat that was that one-on-one over the telephone. So every single person on that estate received a phone call from us. Every single person that needed help received a phone call from us. So where maybe a neighbour might say, oh, number 15 has a language barrier, we'll get onto our contact within the council, and they would get onto that resident and explain we book like a telephone appointment. So we do acknowledge that there are barriers to engagement, and we do walk around the resident. And I think one reason why the consultation was so successful is because we used a range of methods in engaging with the residents, and that suits them. So not just we had pictorial boards that would visually show what we were trying to, the information we were trying to pass on to residents. So we did that. We had interpreters. We had that one-on-one telephone calls with people. We had people that did come onto the Zoom calls. And where people were not able to come onto the Zoom calls, we had a call log, we had a telephone number, a free phone number that was available for people to call through, to leave a message, and then we would get back to them as and when required.
Councillor Gardner, do you wish to add anything?
Yeah, my concern is, and always has been, that people who don't like asking for help, they're the invisible people, that they're the ones that maybe they will come and see a councillor under the pretext of something else, and they'll bring a friend with them, and then you discover that they feel isolated. How do you cope with those people?
Thank you. I'm just cut in there. I think there's probably a distinction between residents that aren't coming forward to ask for a service and residents who have experienced one of our services, but they might be a harder to reach group in terms of providing us with feedback. So there is a difference. In terms of that latter group, I've started to align the service to perhaps move away from these large consultation events to actually focusing on what I would call transactional surveys. So literally at the point of somebody completing a process with us, have applied for a service, have gone through, at the point of that service delivery coming to an end, we test the perceptions with the residents there and then. Now for some that could be through some sort of online questionnaire, etc., but going back to your comments, some people are challenged by those sorts of approaches. It can be a good example, somebody who's been supported, a survivor of domestic abuse. It is literally sitting down with them and just having a structured conversation around how was it for you. Quite simple as that. And it's those gems that you can pick up from just one conversation with one survivor of domestic abuse. They say something, you think, actually, yeah, if we'd have done it slightly differently, we could have made a big difference. So those transactional surveys are certainly the way forward in terms of reaching out to more people who have experienced our services and can help shape them moving forward.
Thank you, that makes me feel a lot better.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you. Collaboration is something certainly that is, having spoken with residents myself on with leasehold, there's a feeling that things get done to them rather than, something has to be done and then there's a bill. So I'm just looking at page 59. I was wondering if you could just give me some clarification when you say qualifying works. What exactly that is? I guess is that building, sort of like roofing or something of that nature?
Yeah, so we're talking about statutory engagement here. First of all, just to take things back, as Marion mentioned earlier on, there is a Leaseholder Association, and we work with them very closely, and their chair, Alan Clark. And one of the biggest areas for involvement is around the setting of the annual service charges. So we work with Alan quite closely there. But going back to statutory consultation, which is a minimum form of consultation, that is in relation to any works which would result in a bill going out for £250 or more. And that's a staged process where we inform leaseholders of up and coming work. We give leaseholders the opportunity to nominate contractors. We then go through tendering exercises. We present information on the tenders that are received and the costs. And then we move ahead with detailed information around the breakdown of that charge which is to come forward. So that's all enshrined in statute really, rather than the council's approach, but quite clearly we follow the statutory guidelines. So that's a minimum. I think what we're talking about here is moving away from that minimum, from really that information and starting to push up that hierarchy really. But yeah, straight answer is £250. If it hits that ceiling, statutory consultation kicks in.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you. And you've actually sort of gone to the next thing I want to do. So the service fees. I think that's come up with several residents I've spoken with is defining what they're paying for. So they pay the council tax, they pay a service fee. What are they getting for that service fee? Because some of the areas, they consider, okay, that's my council tax, that's refuse collection and so forth. But what's happening with someone coming round and checking, the drains are clear, or the roofs on the sheds are okay, and whatnot. So it's what's defined. I think I may have been in contact with you before about service fees. I think they may vary across the borough, but it's getting a sort of a handle on that and understanding why they vary, and whether or not the residents are completely understanding what it is that they're paying for as part of those service fees.
Yeah, there is a difference between service charges for leaseholders and service charges for tenants. So if you're a tenant of the London Borough of Hillingdon, as in all social housing tenants, at the start of the year you'll get a rent increase letter, but that will break down your payments from rent and the various elements of service charge. So that could include caretaking, grounds maintenance, access security doors. So in years gone by, it would be, for example, £100 a week. Now you'll see rent £80 a week, and then all the elements broken down of the service charge. It's very similar for our leaseholders. I think the question is probably less about what am I paying for. It's probably more about value for money, if I might sort of reshape the question. And that, I think, is where we've got a foot in the door with both tenants and leaseholders, not just perhaps explaining service charges, but getting more feedback on the value for money. So going back to caretaking, for example, caretaking is based on an hourly rate. So if you have 1 hour input on an estate per week, then that's the recharge. If you get 3 hours, then it's 3 times the amount. It's quite as simple as that. But it goes back to the value for money for that 3 hours a week. What does the estate look like when the ladies and gents leave that estate at the end of their 3 hours input? And there is reflected in this document, I think Marion makes reference to estate marshals, and that term I'm sure will change and emerge over time, but we're looking for perhaps co-inspections. So actually to look at the quality of estates, to help to set estate service standards as well, pictorial standards. What should the estate look like, graded A, B, C and D, and when a particular service, be it grounds maintenance, be it caretaking, leave the estate, then it should be A, and as time ticks by the time it gets to C, they're back on the estate again as part of their schedule to bring it back up to A again. So something around that, but to work jointly with residents in a collaborative approach to start to formulate those standards. And that will help us in the context of, am I getting value for money? Because at the moment, what are you measuring it against? Yeah.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chairman. You mentioned the 3 TRAs that are council funded, and I suppose I have to declare an interest here because one's in our ward, actually. I was just curious, with the other residents' associations, which are, the self-funding, I think you described them as private, is their constitution the same, the expectations, the way they work the same? Do you still, for example, attend the AGM and confirm that it's all done, that sort of thing? The other thing I was going to ask you, just as a general thing, how many private residents' associations are there? So I'd like, to understand that. But equally, are we clear on, you've got this range of residents' associations. What sort of footprint in the borough does that cover? Is it 50%, 75%, that sort of thing?
Okay, so we've got 3 TRAs that we fund. So the way funding works, we have a template for constitution. If they follow those to the T, we help them build it. We know we can spend HRA funding in that way, so we can easily go ahead and fund. Some TRAs have other things they want to do that the council cannot be seen to be funding. So that's where the demarcation is. And also the number of, like you said about the catchment area, if the TRA covers, at the moment we say 30% of tenants and leaseholders within that catchment area, they will be eligible for funding. But where they don't cover any tenanted properties or social properties, we can't be seen funding them with what's HRA funding. You know, they have to cover at least 30% of that, and that's where the funding will come from. In terms of how many other associations we have out there, it's clearly out on the council's website. So when they come through to us, they fill out a form. We ask for their constitution, AGM. We go through it. We make sure it's something that, you know, there's no red flags within it, and we upload onto the website, because people do come onto the council's website to find contacts within communities. So if you go onto the council's website under Residents Association, you have a list of people on there. In terms of funding, we would only fund those that request funding. Some people don't, you know, and the funding's for running of the day-to-day operations of the TRA. So if they do not really need funding for a particular year, they skip it and then apply the next year. So and before we fund, we look at the accounts. We make sure it is independently audited, and we make sure that things are spent within certain ways. There are restrictions on the spend, put it that way. So you can't go off and buy flowers and bottle of gin, you know. But you could hire a hall to run your meetings. You could do refreshments within that based on what you're doing. So you could buy stationery. If you've got printer, you could buy the cartridges for the printer. So it's for that day-to-day operation. And the funding ranges based on the number of properties they cover within the catchment area. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Chair. It does pretty much, just to clarify,
yeah.
The TRA might not apply for money anyway.
Yeah.
To be eligible for money, they've got to have 30% social housing.
Yeah.
And also the Constitution's got to be as such that it's
compliant.
Yeah, I'm not talking in terms of particularly the democratic element, because I take that as read, but in terms of we want other things to do.
Yes, how would you manage your finance? Equal opportunities within there, inclusivity. How regularly would you meet? How transparent would you be? So we have a template of what the council's looking for within community organisations or community groups. So if you come together as a group, mostly people would say to us, oh, what should we do to be effective in the way we run a TRA? Then we'll pull out that template and we'll say, this is what you need to do. This is how you... So we walk them through the process. And what they would do is build on that, make it bespoke to them. So some people rather want to meet every month. They want to meet monthly. Some people want to meet bi-monthly. Some people would say, no, we'll just do quarterly. It's up to them. And going back to your question about support, do we go to those AGMs? We only go to AGMs where we're being invited to go in and conduct the AGMs for them, or where they've invited us as a guest. Some people run on their own. We set them up, and they're good to go. The aim is not to hand-hold them, but to make sure we capacity build them to a point where they could self-run, and we only step in when there's an issue there. So if we have to handle them, then we're not doing a good job at it. We have to be able to support them from scratch, capacity build them, and let them run with it.
Thank you very much. You've mentioned meetings with resident groups, etc. I think if we were honest, there are a number, as Councillor Gardner has alluded to, of residents who just don't want to go to meetings. They would just rather sit home and do whatever, well, quite rightly so, fair play to them. But where we come into play with this strategy, you mentioned it earlier, we need to go out into those communities, not expect them to come here. And I think rather than just looking at it through the way of meetings, we need to engage in alternative ways. One example I can give is myself and Councillor Chapman do street surgeries as councillors. We would advertise to the road we're going to be there, and they would come and see us on the day. But something like that with, as you say, the housing estate managers or things like that, and also pairing up with other outside bodies such as the police and other things, and going into those areas and just being seen and visible is a very good step in the right direction, I feel, personally. Sorry, Marion, was you going to say something?
Yes. We work closely with the community safety team as well, and they have partnership days. They go out into communities, they have partnership days, and I work closely with Mario, who leads it, and he's like our eye out there. He's come back to us in the past to say, oh, I met somebody who wants to do a bit of work in their area, and that's the contact, can you contact them, can see what they want to do. Sometimes, but when you talk through what needs to be done, people think, oh my God, I might not be able to do this on my own. So we say to them, okay, this is how you would start off. If you think of a catchment area, we have a template, we share it with everybody, push it through the doors and ask people if they're interested. Before you could set one up, you have to make sure people want to work with you, or not, so everything will just fall flat. So you want to make sure that people want to work with you. Where there's interest, you come back to us, and then we walk you through the next step. So there's support there. And I agree with you, we do need to have some more. Traditionally, in the past, it's mainly run with, the associations are made up of mainly retired people that show more interest, and there's always a struggle to get others, the younger population, to be involved in TRE. They look at it as something, we'll leave it up to our seniors to do, and they only get involved when there's a burning issue in the area, and they all just come out. But we're trying, with the engagement strategy we're putting forward, or we're trying to develop, we're going to look at different ways of getting involved. And as I say, that's why we're here. Part of it is to work with the select committee to bring forward ideas in your own local wards, what you think your residents want. You could feed that back to us, and we could use that information to build on how we engage with the residents in your local areas too.
I also feel an easy win would be engaging in community activities that have already taken place. Things like we've got street parties, Christmas fetes. There are various organisations that arrange local events in local areas, and having a council representative of some kind, whether it be domestic violence or other parts, having a presence there would help as well, engage with residents locally. That would be one step perhaps. The report doesn't mention the youth council. I think that might be a potential avenue to explore if we're looking to engage with younger residents. I'd welcome other suggestions from members if there are any. Councillor Farley, I know you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. You sort of touched upon something I was going to ask about was some of these forums and resident associations. The first one, the housing forum, what was on that was how you were going to actually increase the numbers of people engaging with that, but also with generally with housing, with resident associations. I am aware that they are quite powerful in their own right in certain areas, and they do intend to protect what they see as being their area and so on. One thing to be sort of cautious about is that how powerful they've become, or how stop them from becoming so insular, I guess is what I'm getting at with that. And also touching upon the sort of digital side of things. Obviously we've got social media and groups. I've started using this Nextdoor app recently, which is quite highly localized for areas, and it sort of, you could get sort of themes. But also I'm aware that some residents in my ward, which just on their road or part of their road, they have WhatsApp groups which they use to engage with each other and to discuss issues that are for their immediate area. So I don't know if there's a sort of way of using WhatsApp or some sort of equivalent. That's sort of like the council hosts it or something, and then people can join those sort of WhatsApp type forums. Because as the chair said, people don't necessarily want to come to meetings, but they might be more willing to engage on WhatsApp or something like that. Thank you.
Very quickly, I'd add, in terms of, I think it was a question you posed about how do we propose to increase perhaps numbers of people at Senate, etc. And the answer, frankly, might be we don't, because we are looking at other opportunities. The staff survey we conducted last year, we had just over 1,000 responses. So that's 10% of our customer base. So there aren't many services that get that sort of regular feedback. And the transactional surveys is another one as well. Going back to some of our more traditional groups, we do need to pose the question, how representative really are they? So if you've had somebody that's experienced the service and provides feedback at the point of service delivery, it's probably the best feedback you're going to get to help shape our services moving forward, really.
Are there any other comments or questions? Okay. So to try and move this forward, what we do need for our next witness session is to have some contribution from members here this evening as to what witnesses composed. Would it be representatives from residents' associations, or what are the type of witnesses you would like to see at the next meeting, so that we can do the work outside to ensure that the right questions are asked at the next meeting? I believe that covers it. Neil, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, Rod and I and Marion, we've already spoken about some ideas in terms of people to invite, to really get to the heart of the matter and hear the voice of the residents. They can be involved in shaping this alongside members. But if members also had ideas around the kind of people that need to be reached out to in an effort to get them to attend these witness sessions, and we only have one more coming up, this can be a valuable one. I would welcome that, and whether there's I don't know whether members want to do it tonight or want to go away and think about it and send me something offline, whether you want to think about key themes that you want addressed at that next meeting between both residents and officers, with a view to hopefully then making suggestions for shaping this strategy moving forward.
I think maybe a residents' association would be one idea, where we approach Harbour to see if they've got anyone they could put forward. Hillingdon Alliance of Residents Associations, it's one big broad group, so they might hopefully be able to find someone in them on that. Any other suggestions?
I think I was going to suggest you just need to just remind the select committee, with due respect, that this is an HRA, Housing Revenue Account funded service, so that our specific focus has got to be on council tenants and leaseholders. That's where we're funded from, and they are our customer base. So we're certainly aim to get some attendees in, some residents in that have worked with us and that can share some views. And we thought it might be helpful to try and do a quick litmus test, a quick dip with maybe 100 residents between now and the next meeting, just to get some feedback for members as well, some views about how residents might think we could do things differently as well. So we'll aim to get that done. Might not be able to do it in advance and share it, but certainly we should be in a position to table that on the 9th. So if we aim for that as well, we're happy to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would Councillor Farley, do you want to finish off?
Thank you. Are we able to get anyone from the Association of Council Leaseholders? Because I am sort of keen to hear from that side of the council's provision.
We're more than happy to approach Alan Clark. Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for your contributions on this item. As I said before, the officers, if they wish to go, I don't think it'll be much longer after this, but you can go if you wish to do so now, if you're in a rush. Thank you. We move on now to our next item, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan. Are there any comments or questions? I can see none, so we'll note that. Thank you. And item 9 is our work programme. Sorry, Neil, did you?
So, Councillor Chapman.
Oh, Councillor Chapman, sorry.
You wanted me to go through the the work programme.
Yes, we can do that. If
Yep.
anyone else has any points you want to raise first, though. No? Okay.
Yeah, so thanks, Chairman. So just to clarify then, so Councillor Chapman raised a point on the minutes on some of the suggestions for inclusions on the work programme moving forward, and he suggested that I'd come back to yourself and he and not included the rest of the committee, which I was shocked at myself for. But I actually looked at it. I've just looked at the email. I'm pleased to say that the committee did receive that, but I'm happy to go through again. So items that have been added to the work programme include recycling, which is coming at the next meeting alongside the update on the previous ReSpot review on littering and fly tipping. And climate change, not only has that been added for a full report later in the year, but there's also an interim report coming with a kind of a briefer update so that members are kept abreast on the emerging situation. Now, items not within the Select Committee's remit included pest control, which is under the remit of the Public Safety Committee, alligating, which is under the remit of the Corporate Services Committee, and also an information on that was considered at the previous Corporate Services Policy Overview Committee in January 2021, so members are free to look at the minutes for that. And finally, the Hillingdon First Card, which is also under the remit of the Corporate Services Committee. And finally, there was a suggestion on an item on street champions, but officers have advised that that scheme in general is under review in terms of making some changes. I'm not privy to what those changes might be, but it's been suggested that officers need to look at that in more detail first before they can then share that information with the committee. So that one is somewhat on hold at the moment, but I am keeping abreast of that. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Chapman, do you wish to add anything to that?
No, that's excellent, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. With there being no other comments, thank you very much for your attendance this evening, and the meeting is now closed at 9:05. Thank you for your attendance, and good night.